recorded, so hopefully everyone heard the recording sound. Welcome again to our RiSWP event today, Balancing Act featuring Ashwin at Brown and Caldwell. We're really excited to have you all here. Before we dive into the programming, we have a few SWAN announcements. So let's get into those. So first of all, who are we? We are SWAN, which is the global hub for smart water in terms of drinking, waste, and stormwater. And within SWAN, we have a Rising Smart Water Professionals group, aka RiSWP, where we are a group of young professionals, 35 and under, who are interested in joining and advancing the smart water sector. I want to give a shout out and congratulations to our two new members of the RiSWP leadership team, John and Nazgari. Welcome to the leadership team. We're so excited to have you. And then within SWAN, we have some upcoming events, in-person events, and we really love seeing our young professionals at them. There's the SWAN Pavilion at WEM in Birmingham. So if you're going to be at WEM, please stop by. We'd love to see you. Also, don't forget to register for our upcoming London Unconference workshop. So if you went to we really flipped a conference upside down, and all participants become active members of the conference. There'll be a America's workshop in Phoenix in January. We're going to be at Aquatech in Amsterdam, and make sure to mark your calendars for the 15th annual conference in Berlin. So speaking of that, it'll be on May 27th to 29th in Berlin. We'd love having young professionals submit abstracts and present, so please be on the lookout for a call for abstracts. And likewise with our Phoenix workshop, we just announced it yesterday, and we will be putting out a call for abstracts after WEFTech. So be on the lookout for that. We really want to feature our young professionals there as well. And then, within RiSWP, some initiatives include a career development program. We have a career portal to help you really fuel your career development. We have a training initiative through Smart Water courses. We have a mentorship series like we're at today to hear from leading global smart water professionals, and then the ambassador program. So this is a leadership initiative for young professionals to really jumpstart your career. And so these mentor series are all about interactive digital interviews with leading smart water professionals. We have guiding questions, lots of time for audience Q&A. We want to hear from you. And we post the recordings on the RiSWP webpage. So that way, if you miss an event, you can always go back and you can always refer back to today's call. And if there are any ideas you have, any mentors, any ideas for future topics, please let us know. Reach out to RiSWP leadership team, and we'd definitely love to hear from you. So that's a little bit about SWAN, and I'm going to pass it over to Batimelo, one of our RiSWP leaders, so she can take over the call.
Right. Thank you so much for the intro, Maddie. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Batimelo, and as Maddie mentioned, I am one of the RiSWP leadership team members. We do not have a presentation today, so you are welcome to put your cameras on if you would like to. Could you please just introduce yourself in the chat box? You can tell us about yourself, where you are, and where you are from, and just a little bit about how the session will go today. We have Ashwin, who is our mentor for today. I have a few questions that I will be asking him. So the session will be 55 minutes long. And at the end of my questions, we would like the session to be as interactive as possible. We will open it up to the audience to ask Ashwin some questions as well. As Ashwin is answering some of my questions or our questions, you are welcome to just type your questions in the chat and we will get to them towards the end of the session. So just a short intro about our speaker today. Ashwin is a principal at Brown and Caldwell. His role at BC is balanced between helping strategize BC's research and innovation and digital solutions. Previously, he was a research program manager with the Water Research Foundation, where he led their research portfolios on energy, biosolids, and intelligent water systems. He has over 15 years of experience in the water sector, playing different roles between a researcher, a manager, an entrepreneur, and a consultant. He is also a proud co-founder of two companies. Welcome, Ashwin, and thank you very much for joining us today. Could you please just start by sharing your journey with us, telling us a little bit about yourself, your work journey, starting from university, moving to a nonprofit, and now a consulting firm in the water sector?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. My background, I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering. I got that in Anna University in India. That's where I grew up. My hometown is Chennai, Tamil Nadu. That's pretty much where everything happened, and that's where I went to school. And once I was in chemical engineering, I think it was like the third year or so, I was really interested to do some research on the side. So I did enroll myself doing as a research scientist in a different university right there, just doing some, activated carbon filtration process for industrial wastewater treatment. I did that for a couple of years, and then I thought, chemical engineering is very process oriented and super in depth. It might be nice for me to do more on the water side of things. So since I was already doing activated carbon research, I found a couple of professors who were doing similar things here in the US, and one of them was my grad school advisor, Dr. Ken Carlson in Colorado State University. So I applied for a master's program there. I got enrolled, and that was apparently right after the recession. I had no idea at that time like how complicated things were. So I made it to CSU, and then in the first couple of months, I realized there was no money for grad school funding. So I just had to pick up odd stuff here and there just to learn and get myself more involved. And that's pretty much when my professor at the time he said there was an opportunity for me to get involved in some desalination membrane studies that I could probably help somebody with a PhD student at the time. I was like, sure, why not? So I ended up doing that while I got my master's in environmental engineering. Um, by the second year, I think there was a huge oil and gas boom here in Colorado, and everybody was looking to produce water research, and that was a good opportunity for us to get more involved. And then we applied for a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, and I got a little bit more deeper and deeper into produced water. So as I was completing my thesis, which was developing an optimization tool for water management in the oil and gas industry, my professor said he did not let me publish any of that stuff. We just wanted to make that a company because there was a market for it. So we ended up going in that route, and I co-founded my first company with my professor. That company was pretty good. It lasted for a grand total of 7 months before we sold it off. So it wasn't like a pretty long duration. And then we kind of got into that entrepreneurial spirit because this was something we could do, and we were like, oh, let's do some more fascinating research because it felt like research was always cool as long as it's connected to the real world and people could actually utilize it more than us working in a lab. So we did a groundwater monitoring study in the state of Colorado, and an investor approached us, and he wanted to make that a company. So we ended up co-funding another company, which was in action or is still operational. I was a part of it for about 7 to 8 years, and then we ended up just selling it off, selling our part of it to another investor to take it on and go in their own direction. So it's been a fun journey since then. I stuck around Colorado State University as a research scientist, doing a lot more in-depth research and connected work to actual. So my professor was running sort of a consulting firm inside the university, having all our students, like grad students, postdocs, PhDs. Everybody was doing a project for either outside consultants or oil and gas operators here in Colorado. So we had the exposure of connecting with people and learning as much as possible. So I did that for about 7 years. And then I went to join the Water Research Foundation as a research program manager. I was hired to lead their energy research portfolio. A couple of years in, I picked up biosolids, and then I was also the research program manager handling intelligent water systems, which was a passion project of mine, because everything is smart water these days. It just felt like the natural fit, so I did dive into that. I was there for 6 years, and yeah, 4 months ago, I joined Brown and Caldwell to be a consultant to see how things are on this end. That's my
All right.
journey in a nutshell.
All right, awesome. Sounds very interesting. So, Ashwin, you've moved through different, well, you've always focused kind of on the environmental side, but have moved through different sectors. So, you've been in academia, you've been in a nonprofit environment, and now you are in a consulting firm. How did each role shape your understanding of water management and innovation?
Yeah, it's a process. It's just learning different things. In my first role, I was focused on a very specific topic that I wanted to just dive deeper and deeper into. And then I realized it's just nice to be a little bit curious, try to know what else is going on in the industry. And as a research scientist, with the amount of funding you have, which is directly specific to some specific research project, you're kind of limited in that area of what you can actually work on. So there were like 3 or 4 things I was working on, actively, and then there was only like a limited amount of opportunity for me to like dive into, a lot more than what I'm specifically, paid to do. So that's when I was curious about, Water Research Foundation. There was a, great timing because there was an opportunity that opened up, and I was like, it might be nice to, manage projects for once as opposed to just working on all those projects. So that kind of gave me that room to like learn more about like what are the different projects I can get involved in. And yeah, one of the earliest things I was, eager to do was just say yes to a lot of those things. Uh, just pick up and get my toes wet in whatever I can. So as I started managing projects, I was able to like dive a little bit deeper. I don't have to go into the specifics of working on each project, but managing different projects, looking at it from start to finish and what the priority is and what you're hoping to get out of it. That got me really curious. So I was able to like shift to that picture for like 6 years. I was doing and trying to learn as much as possible in that time. And then I felt like there was a time for me to just dive a little bit deeper into some of those to grow more. Again, I think curiosity is probably the theme of the day for me in my life, because I just want to like see if I can learn new things, just to keep it more refreshing. That's kind of like what led me to join BC.
All right. So I know that you are currently focusing on smart water and digital transformation. So what led you to focusing on that?
Well, it's actually 50% of my role. 50% is focused on research and innovation, 50% is on digital solutions. Since I was always interested in this space, with my startup as well, we were looking at IoT and sensing technologies, and there feels like there's a huge push of these new technologies as they're coming ready and to be integrated and deployed at different water utilities and different systems are taking advantage of this. I felt like everything is connected. Data is probably the biggest thing that you can actually access, and it just makes so much, so many things easier. When you look at process optimization, you need to know what you're actually measuring to see what you can manage, right? Um, so it just makes a lot of sense for it to be connected in a lot of ways. And I just thought there was a natural urge for everything to go towards smart water. And that was always a, interest area for me to grow into. So I just felt this is a good time for me. And things just happened one after the other. I had a couple of conversations, and it just felt like this is a great place for me to learn more and do more. So that's pretty much how I ended up here.
All right. And so from your experience for someone interested in smart water, what are research organizations currently prioritizing in the smart water space in terms of research?
It's actually binned because there are like different categories that you can actually focus on. One is the technologies that are available for you to like, pick up and learn more about what's out there and how they can actually implement those. And the other part of it, which is the bigger part, I feel, is each organization, a smart utility or a research organization, they have a strategic plan for all of these. And it's just not as easy as how this is available, let's just implement that. There's a certain cost associated with that. There's an amount of training associated with implementing a smart technology at a water utility. And there are so many different caveats that people need to consider before they can actually, implement something like that. And I love that Swan had this, I'm not sure which year this was, but Swan put together this nice plot which said water utility is in one of these three phases of digital transformation. they're either like they have no awareness of what's out there, or they have an awareness but they're not ready to implement it yet. But then the other one is like they're completely ready, they're already implementing, they're making the most of it. All of these fall into these categories where you actually have to like take a look from the top down, because there are different strategic parts that need to get involved in, and change comes from leadership. And a lot of times it's driven by financial capabilities of what they're capable of actually implementing. And then there's a change management piece where it's also about the people who are actually doing the work. There can be resistance to like implementing new technology, especially like right now with the AI boom. Everybody's trying to like incorporate AI into it, and some people are like, "Oh, it's taking my job," and some people are worried about like what can it not control. There's so many things it can potentially do. It's a huge risk, and there's an ethical component to it on what you can actually legally use it to do. So there are different things we need to worry about. I feel like there are different challenges associated with it. You got to strategically think about it as opposed to just buying something off the shelf and implementing it at your organization.
Right. I heard you touched on a few challenges, so that was going to be my next question. Now that you touched on them, I just want to find out, how are organizations dealing with some of those challenges? You managed that, some with some companies or with some stages you require change management. There's still a lot of resistance, and with some organizations, it's financial issues. So, how can we overcome some of those challenges, especially resistance? What can we do to, make people understand that benefits of digitization?
It's actually as simple as having an honest conversation. Just having that word started, it's just sometimes so much more complicated than we think it is. Just trying to understand what the pros and cons of implementing a new technology is, and what does it take for an organization to get there. Those are probably the biggest steps that you need to take. And understanding the culture around people in your organization. So the organizational management and just having a strategy planned around that is probably the biggest piece. There are different technologies available today. There's so many different things that you can actually implement right away if you're interested. There are so many different vendors waiting to help you out, but it's always the people piece that is the most complicated. Just having an honest conversation around, what are their pain points. So I feel like these days people are so focused on providing and fitting a solution to a problem that might not just be defined yet, more than anything. So just having that conversation to understand what their different pain points are, and kind of coming up with the strategy of what you should be looking at, collectively before you provide a solution to that. I think that takes a big chunk of all the issues that we're facing today. Because I feel like if you're forcing a product on somebody which they don't have a need for yet, it's just a harder sell than actually understanding what are their difficulties that they're dealing with, and then providing a solution that actually hits on all those notes and providing that as a better answer to all their questions is always the right path in my mind, in my opinion, that is, please.
All right. So, from your experience, you've worked in research and innovation. You are currently now in private sector. You've started up a business. What kind of challenges did you face in terms of converting your innovation into a business case and get it to be implemented?
From a different perspective, if it's a water utility looking at innovation, for them, implementing something like that is a big risk. So the research part of it actually is a nice component there, which you say that, hey, let's test this out. This can be a research study to see if this works. And you're pretty much accomplishing two things. One, you're testing out a technology to make sure it works. And two, you're also like providing that comfort area as a risk-free zone for utility to like test something out and see if it works, just to like, before you actually do a full-scale implementation, doing a pilot scale study or just a small scale deployment just to see if it actually works, really helps take the edge off when you consider different technologies for implementation. So I feel like that research aspect of it is really, really helpful. And it's also a differentiator in a lot of forms. Putting on my consultant hat, think of research as a gateway to just talking to a client to provide something and testing something out on your own, so you're on your own dime. That is, you're not exactly asking the client to pay for something they don't know anything about yet, but you are also taking, I have certain risk trying out this new technology, but I'm kind of willing to take that risk with you so that both of us grow in some way. the things that you accomplish there is like you're giving your trust and your word in that as well. Like you're testing this out. You have something to lose in there when you do research and innovation for a client, right? And then they get to picture like, okay, you are committed to doing this. So I would love to see how this works. And if it doesn't, the risk is on you because it's your research, right? So in those cases, it kind of like sets the boundaries, and it's a nice differentiator as opposed to just a traditional, client consultant relationship, just selling something that they don't know about. So I really like the aspect that research and innovation brings to the table because you have that conversation with them, you test out something, you make sure you understand the risks associated with it, and everybody's on the same page. And once it works out, you can test out and deploy that same technology. But also, now you have a certain amount of trust that's been built in that relationship during that phase, right? So they trust you that you've tested this with them, you have a nice relationship with them, and it's just a lot more easier, getting their business as opposed to just doing, traditional selling, if it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. How do you go about approaching developing and deploying a new technology? So you can give us an example from one of your startups. What were the
Yeah,
key considerations, and how did you move from taking it from paper to a sellable product?
it is a process. It is not a fun one, but if you're really interested in doing this and if you're really curious, you can definitely get there. I don't think there is no limitations. Anybody can do this. And honesty, it is a learning process. When I, started my own technology and I was trying to like sell this stuff, there were a lot of pivots. There were a lot of conversations to be had. Some of them are not the easiest to have. I can tell you that, in my opinion, honestly. When we were doing a research study and an investor approached us and said, we'll fund this, but to take it to the next level, we still need to pitch it to other investors who are like, VC firms, venture capitalists. They have a different mindset altogether. And it was a process, it was a learning process where we had to have some difficult conversations. Because when I'm a research scientist working on a project in a lab, and I'm trying to go sell this to somebody who has like, probably 5 minutes to spend on me, I need to be better prepared with an elevator pitch that is like really sellable, that hits the right note, and it makes the point in like 5 minutes, right? And as a research scientist, I don't have that skill set. My idea is like, oh, let me do a scope explanation of what the project is and what it's supposed to do and what it's supposed to deliver. And in my first conversation, I had no idea what I was trying to sell. I was just explaining my project. And you could tell by having that conversation in the first couple of minutes, the other person is losing interest in listening to you. So this was something that I learned really early on when I had those conversations with VC, venture capitalists. This was something that's stuck with me. And the first thing they said was, "You are just explaining the project. This is not selling it to me." What he was looking for, this guy gave me an example. The first meeting I had, he was like, "I spoke to this guy previously, and I decided to fund his company." The idea that he gave was, "This is an Airbnb for kitchens," and just by saying that phrase, you kind of like have an understanding of what that is, right? As opposed to me saying this is a groundwater modeling system, it just monitors this, and this parameter, and it does so much. Nobody cares. Uh, Unfortunately, that's how the world works. So he just wanted something that is catchy and it's easily sellable. So when we started going down that route, you actually understand that even though your research might have a market in some space, all those things have to be defined really well. And I was lucky enough to have those conversations with multiple people, failing a few times to understand what actually hits them in their, with the right response. So I was able to like refine some of those things. And one of the other things that I did learn initially was you might have a product, but if there is no need for it, it's a pointless product. So you always need to focus about the pain point. So that was pretty critical, and we had to do a couple of pivots of what we were trying to sell and to come up to a point where what we are actually making actually is sellable because there is a need for it and there's the market for it. In your mind, you might think this is the coolest thing ever, but when you talk to somebody who's willing to put some money in it, they always have a different perspective on, is my money going to make more money for me more than anything? They don't care about the product as much. They don't care about what market you're looking at. They have like one perspective that they need to satisfy in their own minds. And it is a hard conversation for like a pure researcher to have, but it is a process. It did take us a couple of years from where we started, like, oh, let's make this a company, to actually having a company ready to go. Because there are different things you need to learn, and it's definitely a process. But the good thing is, a lot of people in the industry, they're always nice and happy to talk to you. So if there are any questions, or if anybody on the call too, if they have any questions on how you'd like to go about this. And there is no one-stop solution for this. It's all customized, but the best thing is people are always willing to talk to you. You might have seen examples from like, other famous people saying this is true, but this is actually true. You might reach out to like 10 people, at least, five of them hopefully will get back to you. And the biggest thing you need to understand is everybody has gone through something similar and they want to help people not go through the same thing again. So it's always, surprising to see how many people have helped. And in my career, I've been like really fortunate to have these nice folks help me out through my career transitions as well. You'll be surprised. So many people, you can just reach out to them on LinkedIn and they're just so nice and they can just like give you like 5 minutes of the time. It's more than enough.
All right. So I know that a lot of researchers and engineers are very technical people. What soft skills did you need to teach yourself or learn in order to be able to sell your product and be relatable to someone who is not a technical person?
That is actually a huge skill. I've seen so many really smart people, but they have a tough time actually, summarizing in a big picture way for people to just communicate something in a simple way. Because a lot of times when you try to sell something technical, people don't have a good understanding. They don't care about what parameters you're monitoring. They don't care about what probe you're using. All they see is just the value of it. So there is definitely, a couple of conversations to be had, and this is most of the stuff. Luckily, is self-learning, right? LinkedIn Learning is a great resource. There's so many different courses that you can actually take, and you can just spend some time in understanding, what's out there and how do you talk to people about certain things. It's always about, finding that skill set to like just talk and have an easy conversation with people more than like selling something really technical and going through the list of description and specs that you actually have for a product. It's just like, again, as simple as you can. Think of the other person as a 5-year-old or like in fifth grader. I'm sorry, 5-year-old probably is not going to have you buy something, but a fifth grader, for instance. If you can simplify whatever you're saying, it is a huge skill to have. I think that is something really, really important for everybody to have, because not everybody is on the same page as you. Not everybody has the same background as you, but they might all come from different backgrounds, so they might be interested in your specific topic to an extent. But the key is, just having a simple way to communicate whatever you're trying to like communicate, more than being very technical. I think that is a really, really good skill to have.
All right, awesome. So, with the water sector globally having so many legacy systems, and we know now there's a current surge in smart water research, what are some of the things we need to consider as researchers or smart water, people when we are approaching, utilities, because most of their systems are legacy systems and it's not very easy sometimes to implement new technologies there. So what are some of the key considerations when doing your research and also understanding that most of our utilities have legacy systems?
The biggest thing I would say is not to have an unconscious bias. I feel like a lot of the times folks have a very unconscious bias when it comes to things that they need to change from what they've been using for 10 to 15 years. Just being open and listening to different things to understand and be curious about what's out there. The biggest thing I would think is like when a company, comes up with a solution for you, it's not specifically made for you. They are looking at the bigger market. So if you're a water utility, for instance, and you want something that you've been using, your legacy system is like, 20 years old, it's been, running the chains and it's just doing the work, but you want something better. If you're looking at the market, the providers that are going to come up with solutions, they don't have a customized solution yet. They are looking at the 99% of the market. That's what they're hoping to like sell to. So they've not exactly made a customized solution yet. The good thing that you can do is have an honest conversation with them. Take 30 seconds to understand what they're offering, and you'd be surprised how many times they're willing to listen to your feedback and to build something that actually resonates with you and is actually more applicable to you. I think that's one of the biggest things in terms of change management that you can actually focus on. I still feel even in the present day, there is a big unconscious bias when it comes to like, oh, let's not change this stuff. We've been using this for a long time. This is really pretty convenient, and we don't have to like deal with all the change that is necessary, because The training and implementation is going to take time, and it's just not worth your effort. But you'd be surprised how much more efficient you can be, and you'll have this free time to focus on something else as opposed to just worrying about things like AI coming and taking your job. I always use the calculator example. Sure, when the calculator came out, it's like, oh, this can do math. I don't have to sit and do math. And it's not like the calculator took your job. You just use the calculator to do things up pretty quickly so that you can focus the rest of your time on something else as opposed to just sitting with pen and paper and doing all the calculations by yourself. That's pretty much how you should potentially look at AI. I know there's concerns about so many automated stuff, just going off the rails and, taking control of stuff. It's not really there. It's just still with a creator license that you get to authorize and you get to operate most of it in the present day. I don't know what the future holds, but at least now I still feel like there's a huge human component there. And I just feel we should be open to that as opposed to having that unconscious bias that just comes up pretty quickly, naturally.
All right, thank you. So we know that for a smart water project to work, it takes a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. And we have a lot of maybe chemical engineers, process engineers, and mechanical engineers that have now moved from maybe operations to focusing on smart water. What would you say are the most in-demand skills that a person would need to have to make that move from maybe from O&M, optimization, management, operations, to now smart water?
Two things. First thing is to be curious and have an eagerness to pick up new things pretty quickly. Adaptability is key. I feel like smart water, as much as you would like to think that it's a very solid state, it's really more of a dynamic state. There are things that change pretty quickly. Technologies keep changing every other day. And I feel like if you have an eagerness and a curiosity in general to learn and pick up new things pretty quickly, that is probably the biggest skill that you can actually have. I just feel like, just that eagerness to just learn and adapt to things pretty quickly can be super, super resourceful. And the other thing is, I know that, with AI and everything coming through, you don't really need coding skills per se. Everybody says that you do not need that, but I feel like that is a really niche skill set to have. Even if you're not a pro coder, just that ability to pick up new things, just to learn in basics of coding. Because no matter what you think, coding might not be necessary, and you don't have to be a coder for stuff. There are a lot of times, different models and different tools come out, and to customize some of those things to make it work really efficiently, it would always help you if you know just a little bit of coding. And one of the best things about coding or being a coder is that a lot of the folks who go through different lines of code to make complicated programs and stuff, they know the pain that it takes to get through all of those things. And it is a conscious push that I think 9 out of 10 coders put their code on public repository like GitHub, for instance. And all of this stuff that you actually learn and go through, it's always open source and it's always there. Yeah, if you know a little bit of coding, just enough to pull stuff from GitHub and do some stuff on your own, it is a really, really good skill to have. I know that this kind of might be controversial because, with the AI boom, everybody feels like you don't need to be a coder, which is true. AI does most of the coding for you, but just having that, what to change and where to change things in code, is a huge skill set in my experience. At least I feel like there's a lot of cases for data scientists could do wonders in a water sector, but then again, when you work in the water sector and you're a data scientist, you're probably better off making more money as a full-on data scientist working for a software company, as opposed to working in the water sector. And it's just like that niche skill set that not everybody has, and if they have it, they want to do something else. But I feel like if you have that basic little level of coding that you're actually able to pick up stuff, I've seen recent experiences just state that it just makes a lot more sense to just have that niche little bit of a skill set to actually pick up skills around coding. I think that's really beneficial. Those two things just help you progress to the smart water world, in my opinion.
All right. I know that there are multiple coding languages. What are the most popular ones in the water sector?
I would stick to Python.
Python.
Python is probably the best there is, especially for modeling and different tools. Even GIS, for instance, you can automate scripts using Python. I feel like Python is just a very strong code for you to have, and it's also one of the easiest to pick up, I believe. And again, most of these things, as connected as they are, it's also like if you learn one thing, you can also pick up the next thing pretty quickly. And the best thing about code in general is most of them are open source. It's all available online, and there are so many different self-taught programs. So you don't have to enroll in a course or get a degree for some of this. If you can spend like, I don't know, 15 minutes a day, you can pick up a lot of stuff in a month. It's just surprising to see, how efficient that can be.
All right, thank you. I think you already touched on this, but I'm just going to ask it again. What
Sure.
advice would you give young professionals looking to make a mark in this field?
Just be curious. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, at least as far as my career has gone, I've been really fortunate and lucky enough to have those nice network of people that I can talk to and ask questions and grow. But I just feel like the biggest thing that you can do as a young professional, especially, is be curious, say yes to almost everything. Because once you get older, once I'm 36 now, you know, you get to a point where you cannot technically say yes to everything. We also have a 10-month-old at home, so things do change pretty quickly. So when you're young, you have that option to just test out different things. Try and expose yourself to as many things as possible. This is something that I learned from my 10-month-old actually, because he's in that phase where he just wants to touch everything around him and he wants to know like what kind of resonates with him and what he wants to play with more. And it's just like fascinating to see that he's just not stopped by, just like two or three things. He wants to like touch literally everything. And it puts them in the mouth, the next thing, but I don't want to talk about that. But I think just being curious, being open to like different opinions and just listening, active listening really helps you a lot. Because when you're young, I think that's the best part. I was exposed to a lot of different things and I almost said yes to all of it. Just getting that experience, trying to understand what's out there is a really good perspective to have in terms of like big picture. And by the time you get a lot more experience, you kind of know like where your comfort area is and what you'd like to like do more, as opposed to just starting off in that front. And it's just gonna be a lot more um, narrow-minded or niche area for you to like work on from the startup. I just feel like it's always good to just expose yourself to so many different things, test out the waters. You can make mistakes. Mistakes are completely normal and human for us to do. That's how you learn pretty much. And I would encourage you to like just do that. Be curious.
Okay, thank you. Last question from me. Are there any particular resources or networks that you would recommend for someone starting up?
Yes, Smart Water Networks Forum. I don't know
Mhm.
if you heard about that, but they're pretty good. Get involved with them. Also, the Water Environment Federation and American Water Works Association, they have so many different committees you can get involved with through volunteering. It helps you do two things. One is you actively network and kind of like find out what's the biggest thing there is, what are people worried about, what are they actually working on, and two, connecting with those people is huge. You get to see like people in all walks of life in the water sector, from like young professionals to from like super seniors and experienced folks who've been around the sector for like 20 plus years. Um, there's a good mix of all these people in different committees that WEF and AWBA and SWAN have. I feel like just volunteering there, it might take up like I don't know a couple of hours a month of your time. That's about it. It's a really, really good experience. I think building your network and understanding what the water sector is currently worrying about gives you that perspective that can be really, really valuable when you like focus on a specific topic that you'd like to work on. And the committees are actually well defined these days. And there's like, I don't know, 20 plus committees in each of these organizations. And also look at the Water Research Foundation. I think they've done a terrific job of having different research hubs for different topics. Just getting to understand that, and you can also see people and the research program managers. I was one myself before. They're always a great resource to have. If you have a question about a certain topic, you can always reach out to them, and they'd be happy to talk to you. Um, I used to do that in the past. It just helped me connect with young professionals to understand what their interest is, and also to get a different perspective on the industry itself and what the future is looking like. So I would encourage you to like look at all these four organizations.
All right. Thanks, Ashwin. So for those that joined a bit late, I did say I'll be asking a series of questions, and towards the end, I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask questions. I see we only have one question in the chat. John, you are welcome to unmute and ask your question, or I can read it for you. Okay. John is still on mute, so I will read it. So, question from John. In your opinion, what is the greatest value proposition for utilities when it comes to digital transformation for water distribution and wastewater collection systems?
I would go stick to what I had originally said. There is a strategic piece to it, which not a lot of people are looking at. You definitely need to focus on the finances and how an organization is ready for that change internally, as opposed to just selling them a solution that can actually help them with the digital transformation. I still feel like there's a huge component there where there's a communication gap between the leaders who sign off on the checks on buying something as opposed to who are the folks who are actually doing the work. Just having doing something as simple as a survey internally at an organization just gets you a better understanding of the different perspectives in motion, and also to like have the conversation about the strategy on how they would like to implement this as opposed to just doing this right off as the one shot thing. There is a process involved depending on the size of utility and the size of their structure in place. There might be a lot of bureaucracy that is involved that is often overlooked. I think having that conversation, having that discussion with them on how these things are, and having a 5-step or 10-step process to actually help them get there is probably the critical piece in actually getting them to a digital transformation piece. And it's not. We've seen that some of the utilities in the US are pretty progressive. They are ready to adapt to these changes and they have the resources to do so. But a lot of the small and medium-sized utilities do not have the similar resources, although they might be interested in some of these things. But there is a huge difference between focusing on digital transformation at a small and medium-sized utility and a big utility. So you need to take it on a case-by-case perspective, and understanding the structure, understanding the organization and strategy for it really comes into play there.
All right, thank you. And we have another question from Ben. Ben, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. My question was just kind of around pilots and demos, like you'd mentioned before. And I know that they can be challenging. They can sometimes go on maybe unnecessarily. So I guess what advice do you have to have kind of a successful demo that then leads to a sale if the utility finds value?
That's an excellent question. I feel like a lot of folks have actually taken a shot at doing this. I would say there are 2 critical components to it. One, engage different stakeholders to provide update and feedback. Don't have all the control to yourself. Having an external committee to like provide feedback and say this is a good spot, this is actually working, or somebody can have a different perspective saying this is not working at all, this is not a good idea to do this anymore. Having that really helps. The other thing is definitely keep checkpoints, have go, no go points throughout the pilot project, and have a defined timeline for it. If you don't have a defined timeline, you're just testing out some stuff randomly, it just goes on forever. We've seen that. I've seen that in my career. I would suggest that have a strong timeline and stick to it. After a point, if it's not a go, it's not working, it's time to chop and try something else. So I would definitely suggest sticking to a schedule. That is the most important thing, but also engaging external stakeholders, just getting them to provide some feedback on your project throughout the duration of the project is really, really helpful. Just also getting that different perspective as opposed to just, you might be really passionate about this, but having somebody just give you advice on how is this working from your perspective, it's a really good value to have to your pilot study.
So that's someone kind of at the utility or even a third party?
Even a third party, based on the topic of that you have, you can always reach out to somebody and they can be engaged in it. It's more like just having an advisor of sorts. Even if you have 2 advisors who are not you for your study, it really helps just give a different perspective. So I would definitely suggest external stakeholders more than internal.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. That's great advice.
Of course.
Thanks, Ben. Next question is from Shalongo. Shalongo, would you like to unmute and ask the question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. My question is, I'm glad you mentioned something about just learning the basics of programming or coding, because it's something that I've been trying to do on myself. So I was just wondering if you have some platform that you can recommend, because most of the time online there's quite a lot of materials, a lot of platforms. It's a bit overwhelming just to choose which one is like maybe suitable, because they are not
Right. No.
structured and all that. So just wondering if you can recommend some
Sure.
platform.
Absolutely. I would definitely recommend LinkedIn Learning for the basics, and Code Academy is something that I've used previously. I don't know what version is out there now, but those were two things I can recommend. The other thing that I would definitely recommend is earlier, the biggest challenge for someone getting into coding was, having all those folders and structures set up in your computer when you can actually test code to see if it runs. Now there are nice notebooks. I think you can just Google notebooks, and there's a Google Colab. I think it's called Google Colab Notebook, probably. So this is like a web page where you can actually paste the code from like, a resource, a public repository like GitHub, and then you can see the live results on the right side. So it's not like two different things that you need to like type on a Node document and then test it out, which is a pretty big, complicated step for previous, generation of coding learners. But right now, having these notebooks can actually help you streamline some of those a lot. So think of GitHub pulling a lot of random code from whatever you like, and then testing it out in a notebook. And Google Colab is a great option for that. Hopefully that helps you. And you feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to like provide some more specific recommendations for what you're interested in learning.
All right, thanks, Atop. I'll definitely get in touch.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Shalongo. Our next question is from Ayman. Ayman, would you like to ask your question? Welcome to unmute.
Sure. Thanks, Ashwin. Very interesting presentation. Just curious, based on your experience with all the different technologies that are coming up right now, especially with Gen AI and all the new tools and technologies, there's always a temptation to test everything and see what might stick. As a consultant and as you work with clients, what are some good ways to measure your return on investment to see whether it's worth going into a new tool or technology? Have you had experience creating some metrics or criteria to make a decision, like a go, no go on certain technologies or not?
It's a very good question. It's also a very loaded question. I think it's more of a case-by-case basis. If you have a specific technology in mind, I'd be happy to advise you on that. But it really depends on who your target audience is, what kind of market you're looking for, and how much time do you have to spend on something like that. So those are some of the critical stuff that I look at when you're looking at return on investment. So I would not have a specific answer for you on this front because it's really on a case-by-case basis and what kind of technology you're looking for. Some of them might be a lot more pilot scale and small scale, and you have a test time of like 1 to 2 years to see if it works. Also understanding the market, who you're selling it to, and who's interested in actually pursuing some technology like that would be a pretty huge critical scenario for estimating a return on investment for that. So in short, I don't have a correct, exact, specific answer for you. But if you have a specific technology in mind that you'd like to get more info on, definitely reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk to you.
All right. Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I just wanna ask on return on investment. Is there like a rule of thumb in terms of how long it should take for the investment to pay back? If you look at the property industry, an investment can pay you back in 20 years. In the water sector, when you are introducing smart water projects, are those types of periods acceptable, or are clients leaning more towards like the shorter return on investment periods?
Well, that's a good question. In terms of the water sector, I've seen cases where it ranges from like 5 to 10 years, because some of those are like big scale projects. It takes a lot of time to implement, and it takes a lot of time to actually understand the benefits of it. It is a lot of money that you're actually putting in. Sometimes it takes up to 10 years to get the money back, which is not entirely wrong because it does optimize and make your processes a lot more efficient. So I would say in general, a 5 to 10 year mark is pretty acceptable. That's pretty much what I've seen so far. If you're looking at a smaller technology that you're trying to sell pretty quickly, if you're a startup company or so, anything less than 5 years definitely helps. Investors typically do have like limits from 3 to 5 years. They don't want to like spend more time and effort more than 3 to 5 years until you're actually showing something as a good return on investment for them from the beginning, which is always hard to do as a startup because it takes you a couple of years to get up and running because you have like multiple pivot points. You might come up with an idea, but it completely changes in the first year. My idea originally was to focus on groundwater monitoring, and a year and a half in, we decided we had to pivot from groundwater to air monitoring because air had a bigger market and was a much more sellable thing as opposed to groundwater monitoring. So there is a risk associated with that. There, the first couple of years is always going to be tricky. For a startup, 3 to 5 years. For a company that is having a solid technology that you're selling to a water utility, 5 to 10 years probably.
Right. Do we have any more questions around the call? I don't see anything in the chat.
I'll ask a
Hey Tim,
question. Hey, Ashwin, how are you doing?
good to see you.
Good to see you too. No, thanks for this. Sorry, I'll miss you next week. I don't know if anyone else will be at WEFTech, but yeah, I won't be able to make it, but I'm sure that'll be good for everyone that'll be there. Yeah, I certainly resonate with a lot of what you said in terms of, working for a solution provider, folks that just focus on that ends up not being always the most successful thing, and it's best to focus on that problem and addressing that real need, because at the end of the day, that's what folks care about, not the wrapping around that. But just thinking about your unique background, you kind of touched on this, coming from CSU academia, Dr. Carlson, to water research, and then Brown and Caldwell. What's the biggest thing you think kind of the academic world, CSU, could learn from kind of what you've been exposed to with Brown and Caldwell and outside of CSU, and then vice versa? What's the biggest thing you think that Brown and Caldwell consultants might be missing that is a real focus at the university level when it comes to smart water?
I think BC is actually doing a pretty good job. It's one of the reasons I picked BC more than any firm,
Yeah.
just to have that awareness of what universities are doing. Universities can be really resourceful in a lot of ways. They act with like lesser boundaries than a typical consulting firm, and they can do so many different things that you can actually leverage in your research. If you're doing a project for a client, it's always nice to actually implement or incorporate a university. So it's a two-way street, right? The university also gets exposed on what the real problems are they can actually solve with their research, as opposed to doing something in a lab that might be published in a journal article like 5 years later, and it might take some time before it gets implemented. Giving them that exposure really helps the university to like pick up new things and act more, you saw that with Dr. Carlson's group. It is always like, working for a consultant or working for an operator. There's so many different things, and you have that direct line of exposure. You also get a better understanding of what really matters outside, as opposed to just what you're working on in the lab. So I feel like both of them could benefit from that relationship. That is something I'm personally trying to do more of. I try to do some of these guest lectures where I can actually rope in universities and get a better understanding of what they're working on. Signing them up on research projects that we can actually do for like, DOE or WRF, for instance. If they are having projects, just collaborating with the university just gives you that access that a consulting firm might not have. You might not have a research lab as a consulting firm, but a university might always, be well equipped for, doing something of that sort. So having that collaboration is key. I feel like a lot of the times, consulting firms do oversee that. I've seen that they're focused on just delivering whatever they need to the client, and they don't care about much else. But I feel like there is a benefit that can be mutually beneficial for a university and a consulting firm when they collaborate and work together. That's something I'm, personally and professionally trying to like increase in the water sector more than anything. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
All right.
Right, thank you. Do we have any other questions on the line? Okay, no questions. All right, thanks. So last thing from you, Ashwin. You did mention that people are welcome to contact you if they have any other questions. Could you please just tell us where we can find you?
Yes, I will drop my email in the chat, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Always happy to answer questions. I did not make it here without my friends and colleagues who helped me through the years, so I'm always happy to be a resource for anybody.
All right. Thank you so much. Maddie, anything from you before we close?
I think nothing from me. Thank you so much, Ashwin. Thank you, Batimela, for moderating, and thank you everyone for joining.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. Thanks,
Thanks,
Ashwin.
everyone.
And like Maddie said, thanks everyone for joining. The session was recorded and it will be made available on YouTube. So yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on your time zone.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.